On the morning of July 14th, 1789, the city of Paris was filled with fear and tension. King Louis XVI had ordered his troops to move into the city. Rumors spread among the people that the king would soon order the army to fire upon the citizens. As fear increased, about 7,000 men and women gathered in front of the town hall in Paris. They decided to form a people's militia in order to protect themselves from the army. However, the people did not have weapons. To solve this problem, they broke into several government buildings in search of arms. Finally, a large group of people marched towards the eastern part of Paris and reached the fortress prison called the Bastille. The people believed that the Bastille stored large quantities of ammunition, which they needed to defend themselves. The Bastille was not just a prison. It was a powerful symbol of the king's absolute and despotic rule. Kings used it to imprison people without trial. Although only 7 prisoners were held inside at that time, the Bastille was hated by the people. During the armed fight, the commander of the Bastille was killed and the prisoners were released. After this, the fortress was completely demolished. Its stones were sold in the market as souvenirs to celebrate the end of royal tyranny. In the days that followed, violence and riots spread not only in Paris but also in the countryside. Most people were protesting against the high price of bread. Hunger had become a serious problem. Later, historians describe this event as the beginning of a chain of events that finally led to the execution of the king. However, at that time, most people did not expect such a drastic outcome. This raises an important question. Why was France in such a terrible condition? Hello everyone. Welcome back to Topo IT. Today, we are starting Class 9 History, Chapter 1, The French Revolution. To answer this question, we must look at French society during the late 18th century. In 1774, Louis XVI of the Bourbon dynasty became the King of France. He was only 20 years old and was married to Marie Antoinette, an Austrian princess. When Louis XVI came to the throne, he found that the treasury was completely empty. France had been involved in many long wars, which had drained its financial resources. Maintaining the lavish and extravagant royal court at the Palace of Versailles was also extremely expensive. Under Louis XVI, France supported the 13 American colonies in their struggle for independence against Britain. This war increased France's debt by more than 1 billion livres, raising the total debt to over 2 billion livres. Lenders who provided loans to the French government began charging high interest, sometimes as much as 10%. As a result, a large part of the government's budget was spent only on paying interest. To meet regular expenses such as maintaining the army, running government offices, and supporting universities, the state increased taxes. However, this created serious problems within French society. French society at that time was divided into 3 estates under the feudal system, which is known as the Old Regime. The first estate consisted of the clergy, and the second estate consisted of the nobility. These 2 estates enjoyed special privileges by birth, the most important being exemption from paying taxes to the state. The third estate included peasants, workers, and the middle class. Peasants made up about 90% of the population, but most of them owned little or no land. Around 60% of the land was owned by the nobles, the church, and wealthy members of the third estate. The entire burden of paying taxes fell on the third estate. Peasants were forced to pay various types of taxes. They paid feudal dues to the nobles and were required to work in their fields, serve in the army, or help build roads. The church collected a tax called tithe from peasants. In addition, the third estate had to pay direct taxes such as the taille and indirect taxes on everyday items like salt and tobacco. This made life extremely difficult for common people. During this period, France also faced serious economic problems. Between 1715 and 1789, the population of France increased from about 23 million to 28 million. This caused a sharp rise in the demand for food. However, agricultural production did not increase at the same rate. As a result, the price of bread, which was the staple food of the poor, rose rapidly. Most workers were employed as laborers in workshops where wages were fixed by owners. Their wages did not increase even though prices rose. This widened the gap between the rich and the poor. Whenever droughts or hailstorms destroyed crops, food shortages became severe. These conditions led to frequent subsistence crises during the Old Regime. Within the third estate, a new social group called the middle class began to emerge. This group included merchants, manufacturers, lawyers, and administrative officials. They earned wealth through trade and industry and had access to education. Unlike peasants, they were able to understand new political and social ideas. The middle class strongly opposed the system of privileges based on birth. They believed that a person's position in society should depend on merit, not on family background. These ideas were inspired by philosophers such as John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Montesquieu. John Locke criticized the idea of the divine and absolute right of king. Rousseau proposed a form of government based on a social contract between people and their representatives. Montesquieu suggested dividing government power among the legislature, executive, and judiciary. These ideas influenced the American Constitution and inspired political thinkers in France. The ideas of these philosophers spread through books, newspapers, salons, and coffee houses. Many times these ideas were read aloud so that even illiterate people could understand them. When people learned that Louis XVI planned to impose further taxes, anger and protest grew rapidly against the system of privileges. All these social, economic, and political conditions together created a revolutionary situation in France. The storming of the Bastille became the symbol of people's power against injustice. This event marked the beginning of the French Revolution, which would soon bring dramatic changes to France. In the next topic, we will study how these problems led to the formation of the Estates General and the National Assembly, and how the revolution started taking an organized political shape.